That was quick. Hi everybody, I'm Skip Alzheimer. Welcome to the AV Geeks Lunchtime Streaming Show, where we watch old 16mm films, even when they're super short like that. That was from the Mogul Brothers Library via Oregon Archive, which we've been scanning stuff from their collection. And, yeah, dangerous. Here's another short film from the Craig Baldwin Archive, and this was a TV show kinescoped called Science in Action, and this is just a clip featuring another nature clip. Enjoy.
You have just seen another in the fascinating television series, Science in Action.
Sharp teeth. I'm surprised. I see you have gloves on. About how old is Binty at the present time?
He's about 2 years old, Dr. Harold.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, about 2 years old.
What will happen if I try to bring this tail out here so we can show that he has a very prehensile tail? Well, you certainly know how to handle that animal. Now, there he goes. If you don't mind, I'll stand over at this side. Now, Binty, if you come back around here.
He doesn't like to have his tail touched.
I can see where that did disrupt something. He has a prehensile tail, though, and he uses that so that he normally comes down a tree head first. Well, he seems to be a little bit rambunctious. Of course, Binty's never been on television before. That's certainly a beautiful animal. And I hope that you have... So, how much does he weigh now? One thing I wanted to ask you about.
30 pounds.
30 pounds.
30 pounds.
Well, that's the first Binturong's ever been on television. So, Pete, I want to say thanks to you for bringing him over to us, and I hope you have good luck in his training in the future. Look at that wonderful
He'll be
tail.
all right now after we
big
get...
feller. Well, thanks very much, and we'll look forward to seeing him some other future time. We hope that you'll plan to be with us on our next program. Thanks a lot.
The animal did not want to be on that podium. It was like, holy cow. And I checked the spelling because I was like, is that right? And it did come up spelled that way, I think. Yeah, I don't know. Anyways, there's the limited interaction with Binty. All right, let's go to Denmark. It's probably a lot cooler there. Enjoy.
As most of you know, I was born in Denmark, and so it's quite sure that I tell you a little about my native country. I have tried to catch the atmosphere of Hans Christian Andersen's fairy tales and used it as the basis of my tour. Here in the cozy harbor district of Nyhavn in Copenhagen, he lived during part of his stay in the capital. And at the park-like waterfront of Copenhagen, Langendorf, is the well-known statue symbolizing his fairy tale, The Little Mermaid. Superstition has it that a sailor who kissed the Little Mermaid before his voyage on the seven world seas would be secured against shipwreck. In this way, I secure myself a safe journey on the road of the fairy tale through Denmark. For more than 1,000 years, Denmark has been a kingdom, and the royal family is highly esteemed and loved by the Danish people. I therefore start my journey at the King's fine Rococo Palace, Amalienborg in Copenhagen. And my first stop is Roskilde Cathedral, where all the Danish kings for many centuries have been entombed. This church was built 800 years ago, but numerous changes and additions have been made since then. As I journeyed through the country, my companions and I stopped at Ringsted and sat for some time on the 1,000-year-old Clingstones, where the oldest and cleverest men of the country held their meetings and mediated in quarrels and in fights. But I travel on to see the very oldest royal fortress from the Viking era, built 1,000 years ago by King Harald Bluetooth or by Sven Forkbeard. The Viking ships sailed just to the edges of the ramparts. Now the Viking ships are no longer seen in the Danish waters, but modern ferries carry one comfortably from one island to the other. In the Stone Age, Denmark has been a country of the sea, and the seagull has therefore become the national bird of Denmark. The modern ferry carries us to Nyborg, where the oldest royal castle of the north is situated. Here the kings of the Middle Age were proclaimed rulers of Denmark. And all over this country, many beautiful castles from that time are still to be found. Castles built by squires who partly supported the king, partly fought against him. We get a quick glimpse of Rygård, Hesselagergård, with their thick walls and deep moats built for defense. Today Denmark is a country of peace. Lovely big windmills grind her wheat and rye, and it was in this atmosphere that Denmark's great storyteller, Hans Christian Andersen, was born. The people and the animals described by Hans Christian Andersen very often originated from the Fyn farms. And at such a small brick and timber farm, I stopped to quench my thirst. It is this peaceful Denmark which inspired his world-famous fairy tales. And it gives me a special pleasure to pay a visit to his childhood home in Odense. The house is now a museum commemorating Hans Christian Andersen by showing his furniture, his clothes, his personal belongings, his manuscripts and so forth, as well as lovely murals telling the fairy tale of his life from the time when he was a son of a poor cobbler till he became the world-famous honorary citizen of the town of Odense. The last picture of the sea tells of Hans Christian Andersen's voyages to foreign countries. What a fairy tale he would have been able to tell about the bridges of Denmark, combining in a modern way the different parts of the country across the sounds and belts. I now continue across one of Denmark's numerous bridges to the mainland, Jutland. Along the Danish highways you will find many cozy old inns, built centuries ago to accommodate the passengers of stagecoaches long before the railroad and the automobiles were even thought of. The world-famous Danish beer is a wonderful thing on a hot summer's day. The journey continues past the 400-year-old Koldinghus Castle, which was burned down by Napoleon's soldiers 150 years ago, because they overheated the open fireplaces in the cold Danish winter in order to keep warm. Silently, the cannons of the past speak their mute language to a present which is too warm-minded. On my further journey through the country, I arrived at the first and the oldest capital in Denmark, the medieval town of Ribe, with the enormous cathedral rising above the low roofs of the brick and timber houses. Here Jacob A. Riis was born, the man whom Theodore Roosevelt called the most useful citizen of the United States. As Denmark is the country of storks, Ribe is the town of storks. Here these strange birds spend their summer holidays because they find the climate suitable and because here is a peace and quiet, and in the autumn they fly 10,000 miles south. Whenever we travel in Denmark, the past speaks to us. At the ruins of the old Øen cloister from the 12th century, I open a shutter and find the skeleton of a monk who died 700 to 800 years ago. Abeltoft is a real little fairy tale town. far from the noise and bustle of the world. The small cozy town hall is guarded symbolically by miniature cannons, which have, as far as I know, never been used or abused. I pass by the castle Rosenholm, where Baron Rosencrantz, whose family and name are known from Shakespeare's tragedy Hamlet, asked me to enter in order to get acquainted with the Knight's Hall and the library. Yes, even with ghost stories, which now belong to bygone days. At another inn, I stopped to rest at a place where a group of the Danish underground movement had their headquarters. Here they received the Allied paratroopers and weapons during the Second World War. All the male members of the family were shot by the Germans. But the women of this unconquerable family are still running the inn. I'm nearing the end of my journey, and I stop to pick a rose in the town of Roses, at the brick and timber wall of one of the strangest hotels in the world, Hotel Postgården, Marial. Again I go south to Aarhus, the second largest town in Denmark. A modern town, yes, but in the middle of the town there's an old Danish town, streets and buildings which take you many centuries back. The old signboards tell us of a time when the public had difficulties in reading and writing, so that the signboards had to be substituted by present advertisement. The cooper, the cobbler, the tobacconist, the tailor, the watchmaker, the hatter, the baker. Oh, delicious Danish gingerbread is tempting me. And here I close my fairy tale tour through Denmark. You have seen a few of the interesting spots in Denmark. Should you ever get the opportunity to make this trip, I'm sure you'll enjoy it as much as I have.
Hey, you know, I'd like to know where you'd like to go on King's Crossroads. Why don't you drop me a line, care of the visit, and we'll see if we can do it in the very near future.
That's interesting. That little thing at the end, King's Crossroads. Maybe that was a show, TV show? I don't know. Have to do some research. All right. What do we got? Bread. You guys love that film Breadwinners so much last week. The musical game show about how nutritious bread was, brought to us by the American Bakers Association, that I figured I'd show this little snippet from a bakery. Enjoy.
Highly trained workmen called programmers instruct the computer to solve a problem. In a few seconds, a computer can solve problems that would take a man months to work out. From simple hand tools, man has developed powered machines and automatic machines that run by themselves. Machines like these save man time and effort. In this factory, there are many automatic machines, all designed to work together, one starting a job where another leaves off. This is called automation. This bakery is an automated factory. The highly trained men who have designed automated factories save us much time and work. Here, all the work of baking bread is done automatically by machines instead of by people. And from one part of the factory to another. The speed at which the bread moves is carefully regulated so that each machine, such as this oven, has time to do its job. The bread is directed automatically to the machines that will slice and wrap it. To operate this automated factory, only a few workers are needed. They check the product and make certain the machines are operating properly. Today, we have more spare time than ever before. Yet never have we built and produced so much. We are able to do this because out of simple hand tools, we have developed power tools and machines, automatic machines that run themselves, and now the series of automatic machines that work together in automated factories. Man is constantly learning to invent new and more complex machines to help him work. But only through education can a person acquire the skills and knowledge that are necessary to develop, use, and maintain these new machines.
For leisure time, yeah, check. Yeah, that's interesting. So that's it's a film about automation, obviously, and we are certainly going through another iteration of automation and how that's going to impact us as many corporations hate paying people labor and want to come up with ways to circumvent that. So there's self-checkouts, there are other things that are happening that make it difficult for people to earn a living wage. That's your socialist view of it all. Let's look to the sky. Well, not anymore. This is Skylab, the first 40 days. Enjoy.
Skylab Houston, everybody around here has looked at the bird and it looks real good.
Roger, roger.
And you're being awaited by the USS Ticonderoga. And we're waiting to see you back here in Houston, too.
Oh,
righty. You can relay to the Tycho. We've got their Fox Corpin and our hook is down. Roger that.
This was Skylab on the final day of the first manned mission.
And if you guys
The crew
would like
had this
to,
last
hear
view
about
as
the
they
weather
made
and recovery
preparations for
area,
return to
I'll,
Earth.
give it to you here.
It had been a successful mission.
It's,
The large
pretty
majority
up
of
there.
scientific objectives were accomplished.
10 miles,
But the
visibility.
bright orange sunshade,
About a
the
12
single
knots,
solar
wind,
wing,
the
presented
wind
a
is,
striking reminder of a mission that was something more than routine.
67 degrees.
A mission that gave new meaning to the term manned spaceflight.
T-minus 13, 12, 11, 10, 9, 8. We have ignition sequence has started. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. And we have a liftoff. The Skylab lifting off the pad now, moving up. Skylab has cleared the tower.
It was the afternoon of May 14th, 1973, when the unmanned Skylab Saturn workshop was hurled aloft at Cape Kennedy, on the way to its assigned orbit 236 nautical miles in space. The cloud cover was heavy on launch day and prevented tracking cameras from seeing an event that occurred about 1 minute into the mission. At the point of maximum vibration, telemetry sensed premature deployment of the meteoroid shield, followed by a weak electrical signal from the workshop solar arrays. Clearly, there had been a problem, but the exact nature wasn't known until after orbital insertion. During the first revolution, Skylab temperatures began to rise rapidly, and pieces of the puzzle started to fall in place. NASA engineers surmised that the anomalies were most likely related. It was felt that the meteoroid shield had been completely lost at deployment, which accounted for the high heat levels. Also, that fragments of the meteoroid shield had jammed or otherwise hindered full deployment of the solar array panels. Failure of these panels, which were designed to furnish about half of Skylab's electrical power, meant that the total power burden would have to be borne by solar panels of the Apollo telescope mount. By early evening, workshop temperatures had risen above the level of safety. Launching of the crew the following day received an indefinite hold, pending satisfactory solutions. Flight support and engineering teams were immediately set in motion to find the answers. At stake was the future of the entire Skylab program. The most urgent need was to achieve a thermal electrical balance. This meant maneuvering to an optimum flight attitude for solar requirements that were in direct conflict. Too much solar radiation would drive temperatures higher, increasing the chances of component damage and food spoilage. On the other hand, generation of electrical power to drive heat exchangers and food freezers was wholly dependent on exposure to the sun. While flight controllers struggled to achieve this delicate balance, other teams had the major objective of designing a thermal shield that could be deployed on the workshop to make it habitable. NASA centers and private industry responded with a variety of shield concepts. The most promising designs were released for fabrication. Finally, they were subjected to functional testing. By the 5th day of the mission, the choice had been narrowed to a model called the Parasol. It had good functional reliability, and the crew would be able to deploy it from inside the workshop through a scientific airlock. Another shield, the twin-pole sunshade, would also be carried on the mission as a backup. Here in the Skylab underwater simulator at the Marshall Space Flight Center, crews practiced extravehicular installation of the sunshade in conditions approximating 0G. As for the solar wings, simulation methods were mostly inconclusive. Little was known about the extent of wing damage at this point, and the crew could only speculate on how best to make them deploy. At Mission Control, solar orientation of the spacecraft had begun to yield positive results. Temperatures, still too high for habitation, were stabilized, and electrical power was sufficient for operating vital systems and equipment. Though still precarious, the situation had been checked. There was reason to believe it would remain stable until the astronauts' launch, now scheduled for May 25th, 10 days behind the original schedule. On the day before launch, the Parasol team raced the clock to deliver the flight article on time. They were down to the last 30-minute extension as the Parasol, packed in the flight canister, was loaded for transfer to Cape Kennedy. In spite of the rigid schedule, hopes ran high that the Parasol would do the job. Attention now turned to the astronauts who would attempt to put it in place. In the early morning hours of May 25th, Skylab 2, with both thermal shields stowed aboard, was well along in the countdown. The crew, meanwhile, made ready to embark on their historic mission. This all-Navy crew consisted of Captain Charles Pete Conrad, Skylab commander, a veteran of both the Gemini and Apollo programs. Commander Paul Weitz, who would be Skylab pilot for the mission, had been a member of the support crew of Apollo 12. And Commander Joseph Kerwin, scientist pilot, who would be the first American physician in space. The 10-day delay had been a giant cram course for all concerned, especially for the crew. And their job was only partially complete. The execution of all the planning effort was now solely in their hands. Following a smooth launch, Skylab 2 maneuvered to the proper flight path attitude for its initial downrange orbit. By mid-afternoon, the crew had overtaken the workshop.
TV picture beginning to come in now to the control center.
Skylab Houston, we're AOS at Guam for the next 10 minutes.
Cali, the Skylab. We got her in daylight at 1.5 miles, 29 feet per second.
Roger, Pete, copy.
They effected rendezvous and performed a fly-around to assess the damage. Most predictions were confirmed.
Houston, the meteoroid shield area is solid gold.
Roger, copy.
Your brief description is you suspected solar wing 2, right? No, 2 is gone. Completely off the bird. Solar wing 1 is in fact partially deployed, and the reason that you've got different readings not symmetric between your 3 solar panels is there's a bulge of meteorite shield underneath it in the middle, and it looks to be holding it down.
Roger, copy.
Okay, Houston, it looks like the meteorite shield at the upper vent panel on the SAS wing has wrapped around it just slightly.
Where are we?
Now, my guess is that our easiest thing to do is just go to the end and try and deploy it.
Roger, Pete, from which side of the SAS is the meteoroid shield slightly wrapped around? Is it on the side of the main tunnel? Or
Before docking, the crew attempted to free the wing.
The other side, Dick.
Although the try was unsuccessful, the TV pictures seen here proved invaluable in devising the technique that ultimately worked. Following a night's sleep in the command module, the crew spent the morning of Saturday, the 26th, activating and checking systems in the multiple docking adapter and airlock module. Later, they were given a go to enter the workshop.
So we are progressing slow but sure, and everything so far is working.
By late afternoon, the canister was positioned in the scientific airlock, ready for parasol extension.
Okay, Pete, we had a little drop out there, some noise. Could you tell us what step you're on?
We're about to put rod delta on.
Roger, copy.
Okay, we had no trouble venting it down. It vented in about 4 minutes, and it held 0 for 10 minutes without any outgassing. Door opened very smoothly, and so far the rod extension has gone very easily, and as I say, we're just taking a little heat break.
Some 4 hours after the operation began, the thermal parasol was deployed. It was then placed in position close to the workshop skin.
Well, we don't think so, Houston. We can see the ends of all the rods. It's completely free of anything. There's nothing hanging it up.
It took about 2 revolutions of Skylab before temperatures began to fall. Projections showed that if the present trend continued, the workshop would be below 100 degrees the following day. It wouldn't be the most comfortable environment, but after a discussion with the crew, the decision was made to proceed the next morning with the normal flight plan. The crew put in a long, trying day activating the workshop. Getting things organized and in the proper place was a chore in itself. However, they were discovering to their satisfaction that moving big pieces of gear presented no problem in the weightless environment. By noon, Monday the 28th, with the workshop completely activated, primary emphasis was on getting the biomedical experiment started. This was the first in a series of lower body negative pressure and vector cardiogram experiments. Paul White's the subject, Joe Kerwin the observer. There followed a workout on the bicycle ergometer to check metabolic effectiveness and to evaluate the bicycle as an exerciser for long-duration missions.
Ideally, the handlebars would be longer than they are now and would kind of sweep down around you so you could grab them in the right place.
Other medical experiments conducted over the next few days included blood samplings from each crew member to satisfy the 5 blood study experiments. Body mass measurement to determine each crewman's daily weight and to validate the use of this device for weighing in 0G. A rotating litter chair, a part of the human vestibular function experiment, tested for motion sickness, rotation perception, and ability to determine orientation. In addition to these and other medical experiments, science experiments were simultaneously being performed. Here, Pete Conrad operates the Apollo telescope mount control and display panel in preparation for the solar physics studies. In subsequent operations, data such as this active region of the sun was recorded by the telescope.
Clear sound, but it's pretty cooperative. You ready to start? Got a tape motion light.
The Earth resources experiments also got underway after activation of the 6 remote sensing systems.
Mark, S-192, I got a ready light.
We just came out from over the clouds. How about that?
Auto sequence start on 90 and you EPC go.
From a broad field of view provided by this large space platform, the systems began photographing selected portions of the Earth's surface in the visible and near-infrared spectral regions. Although the crew had earlier encountered a number of equipment problems, the result of excessive temperatures, the prospects now looked bright for a full 28-day mission. The temperature had stabilized in the mid-70s. The food was good, and so was morale. And up to now, the 4,700 watts of available power appeared to be adequate as long as high-load experiments were staggered. However, by the 5th day, some of the storage batteries had begun to perform in a degraded manner. The power shortage grew critical, and it became apparent that to carry out the mission, the jammed solar panel would have to be deployed. Meanwhile, at Marshall, in the underwater simulator, techniques were being developed based on TV coverage of the solar wing. Using only tools and equipment like those aboard Skylab, the backup crew developed a set of procedures they felt would do the job. On June 7th, astronauts Conrad and Kerwin made their exit to put the plan into operation.
Just take your time. Okay, Houston, we're out there. We have the debris in sight. There looks like enough room to get the cutter, and I'm trying to help Joe stabilize.
As the simulations had shown, access to the solar wing was the big problem, what with few handholds or foot restraints. It was solved by joining pole sections of the twin-pole sunshade, anchoring it by hooking a pair of cutters onto the strap that held the wing. Thus, a temporary handrail was fashioned that allowed Pete Conrad access to the solar wing, where he attached a tether. The cutters then severed the strap, and the tether was pulled taut to free the wing actuator. After the crew returned to Skylab, an attitude change placed the solar array system into the sun, where, after a period of warming the hydraulic dampers, the panel arrays fully deployed. Within hours, the electrical power surged to almost double the previous level. It meant that the power management scheme could be abandoned, and the original flight plan could be resumed. In the days that followed, the nagging problems that had plagued the astronauts from the start began to resolve. The mission began to sound much more routine, more like a normal working day. Experiments were coming off like clockwork, and a wealth of scientific data was being gathered. Experiments such as this one in materials processing. With more leisure, it was not uncommon for the men of Skylab to indulge themselves in the fluidity of movement in zero-G. The weightless condition also simplified sleep accommodations. Since there was really no up or down, the only requirement was a sleeping bag type of restraint. And as mentioned earlier, heavy objects were easily handled. It was the small pieces that sometimes got away. But even when objects were lost, they generally turned up sooner or later on the air conditioning screen, there to be reclaimed. On day 29, after performing final closeout of the orbital workshop, the crew donned spacesuits for the return leg of their mission.
Skylab Houston, we're in that hold CMG. You're go for undocking.
Okay, stand by.
Roger.
Okay, we're free. We got 0.4 of a foot per second, Houston.
Roger.
Bye-bye, Skylab.
After undocking, they remained on station briefly to obtain photographic coverage. Following deorbit, the command module, its heat shield trailing a fiery plume, re-entered the atmosphere. For the first time in about a month, the crew experienced the forces of gravity.
Ticonderoga standing by for sonic boom now.
Skylab Houston through Ra 1. How do you read?
Roger, release you loud and clear, Houston. Everything's okay. We're out of 40,000.
Very good, Pete. You're in the groove.
Hello, recovery, Skylab. On the mains, everything's okay. And this is recovery. We have a visual below the overcast, about 100 at 050, 6 miles from Taekwondo Road. Recovery, splash down, and it looks like stable one. Roger, out. Hello, recovery, Skylab, do you read? Recovery, read you loud and clear. How's it going? Okay, everybody's in super shape. That's great. Welcome back. Thank you.
Splashdown occurred some 700 miles off Southern California, near the recovery ship, the USS Ticonderoga. After retrieval and positioning on the flight deck, the command module hatch was opened. One by one, the crewmen stepped forth unassisted, seemingly undaunted by their return to normal gravity. They accommodated to normal activity within several hours. In San Diego, the first Skylab crewmen were received by a vocal and appreciative throng. They had reason to be proud. The large majority of scheduled experimental data was gathered, and all subsystem operational test objectives were achieved. All this in spite of the problems encountered from the start. Problems that in the final analysis required the presence of man to reason, to decide, to execute solutions as only he can.
So, I remember when Skylab fell, when the orbit decayed, and there was talk that it could fall to the Earth, and, secretly wishing that it would fall in this giant field near my house, because I was so bored. It was the summer, and I was just desperately bored for something to happen that was interesting. Alas, it did not, and thankfully it didn't hit anybody. Let's see. So behind me, I discovered a film that I couldn't find in most of the databases that I checked. And this is a film where Coronet becomes self-aware. They become aware of the cultural legacy of what they have been doing since, the 1946, 1945. They finally got like, oh, it's 1979, and our stuff's kind of corny. So this is a really interesting film. And unfortunately, it has copyrighted song at the beginning, so I'm going to mute it, but at the beginning. But this is interesting. It's called Great American Student. Enjoy.
Up in the morning and
So these are shots of Coronet Productions. But you can tell that, but from the title, they get it.
Student? Why not? After all, we, the producers of educational films, created him. And I do mean him. The great American student was male, white, and lived in a very clean suburb. He was aware of girls and often associated with them, but most of the time he kept to his own kind. Girls did their kind of thing. He did his kind of thing. The great American student always looked like someone you thought might grow up and become famous. He was clean-cut, the boy next door.
Eddie, look.
Family relationships were just dandy. Happy endings were a part of everyday life.
Look at my little sister. Is Jimmy a lucky fella?
But how did you know? I mean, it's the very one I wanted.
Eddie seemed to know what you wanted. He insisted we get that particular one.
Eddie, you knew all the time.
Well, I saw you ogling at the store window. I couldn't help see you were crazy over it.
And you said you didn't know how to be thoughtful.
Here, wipe your face. You think you're still chopping onions.
Eddie, what if Jimmy and I double dated with you and Marlene?
Yeah. Be swell that way.
Well, why don't you go over there and ask her now?
Yes, right now.
Okay, see you later, folks.
But now I'm really going upstairs to do my homework.
And we've got dishes to do.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think we've got a pretty nice family.
A fine, thoughtful family.
But there were those rare lapses in family relationships.
By the way, Chuck, I saw Barbara's mother downtown. That's quite a supper party she's planning.
Is it this Friday?
I'm not going.
Why not?
Do I have to have a reason? But all your friends will be there. I'm not going.
Chuck, don't talk with your mouth full.
Usually, our great American student was fastidious. And he was studious. Things were usually swell.
Hey, Jerry, there's that new girl in our math class.
Oh, yeah. Her name's Carolyn Ames. Man, is she a swell chick.
Oh, thanks, Mom. You're swell.
Thanks a lot, Harry. Yeah, that's swell.
Yeah. That's a swell idea.
How are things going? Swell, great. Everything's just wonderful.
Just helping out during rush hour, Bob.
Gee, thanks a lot, Chick. That's swelling.
Okay, Bob. Boy, that sure is a swell-looking camera, Ralph.
How'd you like to double date with Gene and me tomorrow night?
Why, sure, Bob. That would be swell. How about going roller skating next Friday night?
Oh, Jack, that's a wonderful idea. That's the kind of fun I like. What time?
About 8:15.
Well, I'll see you then. Thanks for this evening. Good night.
Good night.
But life wasn't always swell for our great American student. He had his problems. Sometimes he felt different.
Well, what makes you think they look at your clothes?
Oh, because the other fellas wear sweaters or just shirts. Not a regular suit like mine.
Sometimes he felt frightened.
He really wanted to learn to swim. But one thing was certain. He'd never learn that way. Yes, Bill had a handicap. That handicap was fear.
Sometimes he felt left out.
Hey, let's see the ball. Hey, toss it here once, huh? Come on, let's see the ball. Come on, give me a turn. Hey, come on, toss it here once. Come on.
Sometimes he felt just plain dumb.
Yeah, that can't be right. But where'd I make my mistake? Or did I miss something here?
And sometimes our great American student even felt like a devitalized failure. But there was always someone for our great American student to lean on, the expert. Sometimes the expert was Dad.
What about the other fellows? What do they do? What do they like?
Gosh, Dad, I don't know. I never noticed.
Perhaps that's the reason you don't know. You don't notice what the others are interested in. Why not try to find out?
How, Dad?
Sometimes the expert was a coach.
Giving up? Yeah, giving up, that's right.
You're Bill Brent, aren't you? My name's Barker. I'm the swimming instructor around here. I've noticed you out there. You really want to swim, don't you?
Sometimes the expert was a coach with a whistle.
But which one do you think is best? Think it over, Mike. Come to some decisions about what you're going to do. If you let that left-out feeling throw you, you'll pick the wrong answers.
Sometimes the expert was a pal.
That's just the point. If you don't get enough sleep, you won't have the pep to do other things.
Or a pal and a coach with a whistle.
Hi, Coach. Hi, Tom. George. I was just leaving.
Oh, wait for me, will you, Tom?
Yeah, stick around, Tom. You're George's pal. Say, George, I've just been checking over your medical records. The doc gives you a clean bill of health. So what's wrong? You don't smoke. What about coffee?
No.
And sometimes the expert
Just what do you want to find out?
was just a resonant voice from behind the camera.
And what facts will you need to find the answer?
With these, right here.
But whatever his problems were, our great American student always solved them in something under 10 minutes.
Well, Phil, could you have it ready by next week and bring it over to my house?
I guess so.
Some of the gang's coming over Thursday night, and we could have a lot of fun with it. You will come, won't you?
Well, one shy guy is on his way. Not that his worries are over. He'll still have his moments of doubt, of hesitation, of fear that he might do something wrong. But he can face these problems now because he knows that he's not really different. And while he's discovered only a few of many ways to overcome shyness, he's discovered that it can be done. And that's the main thing, isn't it?
Our great American student liked the soda shop, but he knew the foods he ate there weren't really good for him. They made him feel funny inside. So he always tried to eat balanced meals.
Wow! What a breakfast! Is he going to eat all that?
He sure is.
And he exercised a lot in all sorts of interesting ways. But when he wasn't exercising, or eating balanced meals, or studying, or worrying about problems, or solving them, he sometimes thought about, yes, girls, those other kind of people. In many ways, girls weren't much different from our great American student. They studied. They were fastidious. They had problems.
Oh, I just don't know, Sue. Friday night. I'd like to go, but I should stay home and catch up on my homework. It does sound like fun, though. I should stay home, though, shouldn't I? Or should I? I'll ask Mom and let you know.
They ate balanced meals. They exercised a lot. There were even times when they felt dumb, too.
Oh, Mother, that's wonderful. And there's a 9.5-yard remnant at that price? Yes, just a minute. I'll measure the windows and see. 9.5 yards. It's a wonderful buy if that'll be enough. Let's see. 5 feet and one more. 6 feet altogether. 6 feet and 2 windows, 2 drapes for each. 9.5 yards. Hello, Mother. Can you call me back in about 10 minutes? I just can't figure this out.
Girls and our great American student had much in common. They both often discovered this while participating in that great American activity called dating.
I love you, Nora. Do you love me?
Oh, I don't know, Jeff.
You're the only girl I've dated in 2 months. We get along fine. You do love me, don't you?
I think so, but I'll have to think about it.
Boys and girls found all sorts of things to do on a date. But they had learned that there were things they should never do.
Don't, please.
What is?
Say, is anybody else hungry? How about it, you two? Couldn't we go someplace for something to eat?
Well, what about petting? I mean, I've heard you can get too deeply involved if you're going steady.
But there was always the expert to help them out.
Some boys think they can take advantage of you if you date them more than a couple of times. It's natural when a couple goes steady that they're closer together, but you have to know when to stop.
Sometimes Big Sis was the expert. Other times it was Mom.
There are disadvantages to going steady.
Going steady? Yes, I guess I have been going steady with Jeff. We never talked about it. But then, we've dated regularly for quite a while. But it's not serious. Really it isn't.
Why, I hope Jeff doesn't feel that he has the right to take liberties.
Oh, Mother.
Big Brother could be an expert, too.
You know, Bob, Nora's the prettiest girl I've ever known. She's just as beautiful as...
Beautiful? And you think that's all that matters? Oh, hurry up and get in bed, will you?
Bob, did you feel this way when you fell in love with Jean?
Oh, look. I've felt that way lots of times. The trouble with you is, you don't seem to understand what love is really about. You young punks go to the movies a couple of times, do a little necking, and you think you're in love. I've never seen anything like it.
And so, with help from everyone, our great American student wrestled with his problems and solved them all. Life was swell. He faced the future, always sustained, no matter who he was, by his insatiable appetite for life, his wide-eyed optimism, his irrepressible good humor and certainty that things would always work out okay. He'd learn how to improve his skills.
Hey, that sure looks great. Thanks. It's fun to do things that come out right. How about playing some ball this afternoon? Boy, I'd like to, but I have a date with a guidance counselor. Want to talk over some different kinds of work in engineering. Then there's the math club meeting. After that, Bill and Ed and I are having a full session on chemistry. Then I have a date...
Okay. Boy, you sure have been going places lately.
It's easy, my boy. You've just got to do a little looking ahead.
Boy, George...
He'd learn good health.
Am I tired?
How about you?
Tired? Who, me? Sorry,
He'd learn how to be more popular.
Thank you. Phil, I'm having some of the kids over to my house next Saturday night. I'd like to have you come, too.
Oh, I don't... Sure. Sure, I'd like to come.
Good.
Thanks for asking me.
social courtesy does pay, doesn't it? Thanks.
He'd learned what to do with girls.
You know, I sort of like things like this, too. You won't laugh. I like to go on bicycle trips, too. Do you?
And miniature golf. You like that.
Yeah, and weenie roasts and square dances.
And baseball games and taffy pull. I think they're swell.
Say, you like to do lots of things, don't you? Say, Kay, next Friday there's going to be a weenie roast, or there'll be a bowling party if you'd rather do that, or we could go to the band concert.
Oh, I'd enjoy going to the weenie roast very much. Unless you'd rather go bowling.
No, I'd rather go to the weenie roast. If Jeff goes with Phyllis, we could double date with them.
Hey, Nick, hey, come on, we're going to break open the ice cream.
Okay, be right there. Is it all right then, about Friday?
Yes, Nick, it's the date.
He'd learn about life, the universe, and everything else.
Yes, it is. I'd ask you in for a bite to eat if it weren't so late. Let's plan to get home in time for a sandwich or something next time.
Say, that sounds good. I'll call you next week.
Will you? Well, thanks so much. I had loads of fun.
So did I.
Good night, Woody.
Night, Ann.
And so now we too bid a fond and nostalgic farewell to our great American student. He was, how should we put it, swell.
Up in the morning and out to school.
All right. That was phenomenal. It captures all the social guidance films from that time period. And it potentially marked the end of Coronet doing social guidance films. I really think I'm hard pressed to think of a social guidance film after 1979 from Coronet. I could look at the database and kind of maybe see, but my gut is that most of them were up to the mid 70s, maybe late 70s, like 77. But I don't know if they did any after that time. They certainly did. Coronet existed into the 2000s. They got bought. They got shifted around a lot. But I mean, when I'm saying social guidance, I'm saying like almost all of those are about dating, about courtship, about social interactions. There was benefits of looking ahead that was in there. They kind of curtailed away from that, and I think that the 80s, that's when the things got back to this very strict 3 R's. It was kind of that pendulum sliding back to conservative times. So, yeah, I don't know. I might be making a grand statement here, and I could sit and do the research and figure it out. But wow, what a fascinating film. Fascinating. Anyways, thanks for tuning in today. If you like what you saw, hit the thumbs up button. Hit the like button. Tell other people what we're doing. You can also donate via the super thanks button in the YouTube comments. You can also go to ko-fi.com/avgeeks or patreon.com/avgeeks, where you can give us money and I can buy some nail polish remover because I had a horrible accident with some super glue. Like, there is super glue, a big blob of it on my desk, and then my fingers were all kind of like this about 5 minutes ago. So, yeah, that's what we spend things on here. Coffee and nail polish remover. Yeah, thanks for tuning in. And, yeah, come back tomorrow. What is it, Thursday? Man, I'm all messed up as far as what day it is. And we'll watch some more films. And maybe I'll have an answer to that question about whether or not the social guidance film truly died at Coronet in 1980. Yeah, let's see. Everybody Have a good rest of your day, and we'll see you soon. Take care.